Climate change is disrupting the world's established ecologies in countless ways. There are the obvious ways, like higher sea level and warmer temperatures, and then there's also the higher frequency and intensity of droughts, forest fires, and storms. And then there's the biological stuff, like diseases spreading to new areas, the insect apocalypse, and the disruption of many traditional animal ranges, which has displaced and is displacing entire ecological communities. One of the more unknown and scary changes is happening in the Arctic. And there's two big things going on here, one that's geological and one that's biological, and both of them are equally terrifying. The geological phenomenon is that the Arctic's permafrost is melting. The permafrost is a layer of earth that sits about a meter or so beneath the surface, that is constantly frozen year-round. It's permanently frozen. It's permafrost. But because the climate is warming across the planet, and fastest in the Arctic, this permafrost is thawing and melting. This is not just mutilating the landscape, which now looks pockmarked with depressions, sinks, cliffs, and other signs of surface destabilization, but it's also releasing an absolutely colossal amount of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. Melting permafrost has already released an estimated 10 gigatons of carbon. If the current warming trend continues until the end of the century, we would see an average global warming of 3 degrees Celsius, and the permafrost will have generated 3 gigatons of methane and 280 gigatons of carbon, mostly coming out of the vast expanses of permafrost in interior Siberia. This stuff comes from the huge amount of plant material frozen into the permafrost, which begins to rot when the permafrost thaws. If this massive land feature continues to melt, we may be unable to counteract the immense warming effect that all of this released carbon in the atmosphere will have. Now that's pretty awful, but the biological phenomenon is just as, if not more, terrifying. Just as there are plants from bygone ages frozen in the permafrost, there are also animal carcasses, and all manner of microbes. For example, among these microbes, having been entombed inside the carcasses of animals frozen in the permafrost, is one or more ancient strains of anthrax. These anthrax microbes had infected the animals some 40 to 100,000 years ago, and resided in their bodies as they became buried by and frozen into the permafrost. Now that the permafrost is thawing, so are these corpses, and warming up with them are these ancient anthrax microbes. As the corpses decay, they release dissolved organic matter into the air and into sources of groundwater, contaminating them. There's already been a recorded outbreak. In Siberia, in 2016, some of this paleoanthrax thawed out from a 75-year-old reindeer corpse, and the disease infected 72 people, and ultimately killed a 12-year-old child. This is a serious emergency, because we're basically seeing the emergence of one, and honestly, most likely there's going to be more, ancient diseases emerging in our backyard. Scientists also suspect that there are reservoirs of ancient flu viruses, and various parasites, and even smallpox, and who knows what else. Who knows what other kinds of human transmissible diseases could be released from this thawing permafrost. Now, at its deepest points, the permafrost layer is about 1,000 meters thick. This represents material that's about 1 to 1.5 million years old. So trapped within the permafrost could be diseases from 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, or more. And after all that time, we would have lost our resistance to these particular strains. Immunologically, we aren't prepared for this possibility. Now, as terrifying as this all is, there's no need to panic. As far as we can tell, the possibility for these diseases to appear and spread is real. It does exist. There is a chance that it could happen. But that chance is relatively slim. And even in the worst case scenario, we can develop vaccines and antibacterial agents. The long freeze is a double-edged sword, because just as we would have lost any immunity to these ancient diseases, these pathogenic microbes would not have had the chance to evolve any resistance or defenses against our modern medicines. So it's kind of scary. This is a legit possibility, but it's not a fight that we can't handle. We have the technology and the scientific knowledge, from fields ranging from epidemiology to microbiology to virology. What we really need is the political will to tackle climate change, so we can prevent the permafrost from thawing any more than it already will. Let's start there, and mitigate the threat as much as we possibly can.